Hi, this is Professor Lipey, and I am here to deliver the second narration on groups and collectives. This time we'll be talking about groups and the kinds of effects being in a group can have on individual behavior. So we'll talk about interaction within groups. Now the general theme, okay, is that aspects of group processes can interfere with the expression of individuals' opinions, values, and abilities. So we saw in the case of collectives, okay, we saw social loafing, which can, so the group is exerting a downward um, effect on performance, the individuation, a loss of personal identity, increased propensity to engage in ways that don't reflect one's values, social facilitation, the mere presence of others, um, either increasing or decreasing performance on tasks depending on how complex the task is. And earlier in the course, we've seen many pressures towards uniformity, in particular with regard to conformity, okay, and the impact of a normative a basis of influence that we've called normative and informational. Okay, it all has to do, much of it has to do with the ability of the group to basically, in some ways, inhibit or interfere with individual expression that would otherwise occur. Now, well, it's also the case that groups can be beneficial under certain circumstances. Okay, so this is not to say that groups always have these negative effects. But we will look at some of the inhibitory effects of groups, uh, in particular in this particular narration. So we're going to talk about brainstorming, group polarization, groupthink, and the bias sampling that may occur when people get together in a group and share information. So let's start with brainstorming. You've all heard the term. Brainstorming is a technique that attempts to unleash individual productivity of creative ideas by encouraging group members to speak freely without criticizing their or others' contributions, to just have at it and brainstorm. Okay, we've all heard about that, maybe done it. Okay, actually, the research in psychology suggests that group brainstorming in person really doesn't work, and it can be counterproductive. Okay, so research is basically giving people tasks to come up with ideas about something, like what would be a good way to advertise this product, what would be a good way to solve this problem. Come up with as many ideas as you can, and let's say you take 5 people and you send them to their individual locations and ask them to think about this and come up with as many ideas as they can, okay? Or you put those 5 people together, okay, in a group and tell them, okay, I'm closing the door, the group's gonna, I want you guys to have at it and brainstorm this problem, come up with as many ideas as you can. Well, if you add up the number of ideas produced by 5 individuals, okay, that are good ideas, okay, uh, those groups of 5 people working alone, being creative alone, typically come up with more ideas than do the same number of people working in a group, okay, brainstorming in a group, okay. Brainstorming basically tends to be counterproductive in terms of under many circumstances, in terms of generating better ideas in a creative problem-solving task. Okay. Now, brainstorming can, however, increase cohesiveness. Group cohesiveness um, in groups that are continuing to interact, and that could countervail this inhibitory effect of behaving in a group, okay, because the group becomes ever more freer and sensitive. If cohesiveness leads to this kind of sense, of freedom to express ideas. But more often than not, okay, the problem with cohesiveness, and the more cohesive a group becomes, the more inhibited. The more you value your membership in the group, the more inhibited you might be about coming up with ideas that others might find embarrassing or poor or something like that effect. So actually, the increase in group cohesiveness can actually accelerate this tendency for groups to group storming to basically actually lead to fewer good ideas. Okay, so the problems with brainstorming is there's production blocking. You have to wait for your turn. Okay, you might forget your ideas. You might lose interest as you're listening to others' ideas. Okay, free riding. You see yourself as not being necessary to getting a lot of ideas out there because everybody else is. Okay, so maybe you'll engage in social loafing. As I mentioned, evaluation apprehension. You don't want to suggest something that might make you look foolish in your mind. Okay, and performance matching. Group members work only as hard as they see others work. So once the other three factors have reduced the performance of a brainstorming group, performance matching can help maintain this relatively inferior performance. Hey, no one else seems to be coming up with that many great ideas, and so you match your output to that of the group. So there are all these social psychological pressures that actually create problems with brainstorming. Now, it turns out that given the wonders of the internet and the use of technology, okay, there's such a thing as electronic brainstorming, okay, where people basically are in a group working together, but they're typing in, like in a chat, okay, their ideas, okay, and others are reacting, and you're having this exchange going on, okay. That reduces production blocking because you can type on ideas whenever it comes to your mind, okay. Free writing because the computer's keeping track of each member's input, okay. You might be contributing your ideas anonymously, so evaluation apprehension might be minimized, okay. And and performance matching might be reduced as well. Okay, you're focusing on yourself, not on others. Okay, and group members can benefit by seeing the ideas of others. Okay, as they're thinking, which can inspire new ideas that they might not otherwise have considered. So it turns out that electronic brainstorming actually does often surpass the performance of the same people kind of coming up with ideas on their own. So it depends on the medium, I guess, through which brainstorming occurs. Okay, so let's move on to group polarization. Okay, so group polarization is the exaggeration of initial tendencies in the thinking of group members through group discussion. Okay, this is a phenomenon that social psychologists have, and actually people in the field of organizational and decision-making kinds of psychology, have understood and studied for a long, long time, and have really known about group polarization. But in recent years, with the advent, as I think we might have talked about previously, with the advent of the internet, with the advent of social media, we're seeing profound amounts of group polarization because of the increasing tendency to only talk to and exchange ideas with people who are relatively like-minded. Okay, and when you're, as we're going to see, when you're talking about with people and solving a problem with people who generally tend to be like-minded, okay, you're going to see the individual attitudes actually polarize out toward more extreme levels of that position that everybody is like-minded about. So polarization occurs on many dimensions. In fact, some of the earliest work on polarization came in what was known as the risky shift studies, okay? So that back in the early 60s, business students, MBA students' master's thesis basically did a study in which he compared, the participants were administered what are called choice dilemmas. Okay, here's a person with this particular problem. He's thinking of going in this direction, thinking of, starting a new business. These are the considerations that are going on. Okay, with regard to that, what would be what odds would you need to tell the person to go for it? Okay, just as an example. And so you have people basically thinking about this problem and giving their individual kinds of responses to it. Okay, and then they're put in a group. Well, let's discuss this. Okay, and then after discussing the problem, okay, what the researchers ask, okay, so you guys have had a chance to talk about, I'd like you to now individually tell me what you think now after discussing it with other people. And in the original studies, it seemed to be the case that, contrary to lore, which was that groups are inherently conservative, okay, there seemed to be a risky shift, that after discussing the choice dilemma with like-minded, with other people, okay, people actually proposed were actually more risky in the chances that they were willing to tell the person, go for it, okay? So it became known as the risky shift, okay? Why would a group make the group more risky, okay? Make individuals more risky? Why would discussing this problem? Well, gradually we discovered it wasn't a risky shift. It was a shift to the poles, okay? So if you looked at the problems that were being studied, there were all kinds of problems that kind of initially people would be kind of on this side of their recommendations, kind of moderately risky. And so after discussing it, the individuals actually became more risky. But if you gave them a problem which everybody was leaning caution, okay, be cautious here. The odds should be, pretty high before you go on this venture, the odds of succeeding. If it's that kind of this cautious kind of situation that demanded caution, and most people thought of it that way, then after discussing it, individuals became even more cautious. So what was discovered was, no, it's not a risky shift. It's a shift toward the pole that everyone's kind of leaning on anyways, okay? And we see this on all kinds of dimensions, okay? On attitude items, if people start out being, if it's an issue in which people tend to be moderately pro whatever the issue is, then discussing it with others and then going off and giving another opinion makes people even more pro. If it's something where people lean anti, whatever the issue is, then discussing it makes people even more anti. Individually, okay, we're not talking about a group decision, we're talking about how do people themselves feel before and after they discuss it. Okay, we can see the shift here, okay. Even in the realm of legal decision making, there have been studies done in which people are sort of presented with a case in which the evidence seems to favor guilt, okay, and then or the evidence seems to favor acquittal or not guilty, okay. So people watch the case, they learn about the case, and then the prospective jurors are asked to give their individual opinion, okay? What's the probability that this person, is guilty, okay? So before they deliberate, if it's the case that basically was kind of, the evidence was kind of pro-prosecution, okay? You know, people are on a, let's say a 20-point scale, they're 12 or 13 on average after they watch the case and they give their individual responses. In the defense, pro-defense kind of case, you know, people watch the case, read about the case and the evidence. Their initial opinions might be, you know, 7 or 8 when the center point is, let's say, 10, okay? So then they get together as a jury, okay, and they discuss the case, okay? And then the jurors, the mock jurors, are basically asked afterward individually, so what do you think? What's the likelihood this person is guilty? After discussing a guilt-leaning case, people become even more prone to voting guilty, okay? They went from 12 to like 16 on a 20-point scale. If they're 7 or 8 on that innocent to guilt scale, after discussing it, they might be down to 3 or 4 individually, okay? So we get this choice shift, which goes, so people change as a result of group discussion. Their individual opinions become more extreme in the direction they were already leaning. Okay? It's a very robust phenomenon, and we find it in all kinds of realms. Okay? And so why does it happen? Okay, why does group polarization occur? Okay? Well, there's a couple of approaches. There's several approaches, but the two dominant ones. First, there's the persuasive arguments theory, okay, which harkens us back to when we were talking about, you know, persuasion, okay. So basically, if you're in a group discussion, you're going to hear the various members giving their arguments for why they believe a certain thing, okay. Now, if everybody's kind of sort of leaning in the same direction, okay, you're going to hear more you're going to hear more arguments favoring your position from others, okay, than arguments on the other side. So if everybody's kind of making an argument, they're kind of feeling, you know, 12 on that 20-point scale, you know, on average, but everybody's given kind of like an argument supporting 12. Now those arguments are adding up. Everybody doesn't have the same arguments, okay? So you're going to hear a number of unique arguments. And when you put all those arguments together, you know, now, you know, the evidence may favor a 16 on that 20-point scale. The other hand, if it's the other way, if most people are 7 or 8, you're going to hear a lot of arguments favoring, we'll use this as the innocent legal decision, innocent, okay, then you're going to hear more arguments, different arguments than yours, and also repetition of your arguments, okay? And so you're going to get more and more reinforcement for your point of view, and it's going to shift you out even further to be more extreme on your point of view. Okay? As we saw, as I mentioned, some arguments are going to provide new information. Okay? And hearing others repeat our arguments validates our reasoning, giving us more confidence in our attitude. So we move our attitude further out toward the direction we were all, like others, already leaning. Okay? Now, I should note that the effect does not involve conformity to like an extreme person. Okay? It turns out that most people shift. Okay? It's not that, you got a few people sort of toward the middle kind of move toward the majority. It's the entire group tends to shift, okay, and become more extreme. Okay, the other or another theory, okay, is what's called the social comparison cultural value approach. Okay, so that goes this way. So the construction of social reality in like-minded groups is a two-step process according to this approach. Okay, what happens is, well, it was kind of the evidence kind of mildly favored guilty, right? So that's your opinion, but it's moderate, okay? But you then find that others support your point of view, okay? Not necessarily, we've seen persuasive arguments, and their arguments do, but also the mere fact that other people are on your side. Okay, more support for your opinion than you had originally anticipated. Okay, well, that discovery sets up a new norm, a more extreme norm, and it motivates people to go beyond that norm. Okay, this is the good answer. Okay, and and there becomes a motivation to, um, give an even better answer. Okay, the norm is 12, 13. Well, I think it should be 14 or 15. You get motivated to be different from the others in the right direction. Being different from average in the right direction is culturally valued in our society. We don't like people who are kind of middle of the road, just leaning one way or the other. We like people who are firm and a little bit more extreme in their beliefs. Okay, so the cultural value of being extreme, being more extreme, a little bit, if you will, having an attitude that's even better than average. Okay, motivates you to, once you learn that others are in the same position as you are, kind of push yourself out to a more extreme position. Of course, everybody's doing that, so everybody in the group polarizes. Okay, so by adopting a more extreme attitudinal position, members can distinguish themselves in the group in a manner approved by the group. Okay, we, better to be, everybody wants to be above average, right? And we kind of see ourselves as above average. Well, in the attitude realm, okay, it's also true. We want to be above average, that is more extreme than average, okay, in the right direction. So that's that idea. Okay, so if we look at the persuasive arguments and social comparison theories, okay, we see old ideas in group battles. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, the two major interpretations of group polarization can be seen in the light of a scheme we've seen earlier. Okay, persuasive arguments process primarily involves informational social influence. You're pushing out, you're polarizing, okay, because of the information you're receiving, information that confirms your arguments and also presents you new information, other people's arguments, which you didn't have, okay? So it's an informational social influence process. You're getting more information that favors the side you're modestly already on. Social comparison process primarily involves normative social influence, okay? So, we want to be, we want social approval, okay? And that's what normative social influence is all about, right? What's bound up in social approval? If you have the right kind of attitude that's properly a little bit more extreme than average. Okay, so that movement doesn't involve getting information, but it's because of this implicit need that we have for social approval and being valued for that by others. So that's an important connection to make, and this is a good slide to hark back to as you study informational social influence and normative social influence, as well as group polarization. All right, so that brings us to our final topic of the day. Well, no, I guess it's the semi-final one, but it's the one that's going to spend most of the rest of the time on. So you've all heard of groupthink. In psychology, groupthink refers to a decision-making style, okay, in which the members of the group have this strong tendency to seek concurrence, to seek agreement, to seek unanimity, okay? And becomes the primary motive and the trappings of the situation created, okay? So basically, So groupthink actually, the theory was developed by Irving Janis, okay, um, a social psychologist at Yale for many years, okay, who basically studied some fiascos that resulted in, at high levels. Okay, one of the ones that he studied was the Bay of Pigs invasion that of Cuba that occurred in 1962, where uh, the this plan to basically invade Cuba through the Bay of Pigs, okay, which is near Guantanamo down there, was basically agreed on by President Kennedy and his cabinet and his advisors and so on and so forth after discussing this. And it ended up to be a complete fiasco and disaster, okay. Um, so Janis carefully analyzed what went on for such really brilliant people and knowledgeable people, military people, his cabinet, the attorney general, all these people in Kennedy's orbit, okay, could make such a stupid decision, okay, and he analyzed some of the reasons for that, okay, and also analyzed other situations. And it seems like the antecedents of groupthink, if the group is highly cohesive, if you've got, we're going to see some of these things in a moment. If you've got homogeneous members that, everybody's kind of sort of like-minded to begin with, they're very similar to each other, as was, Kennedy's team, okay. The group isolates itself from the outside and puts its head together in like private discussions where you had a leader who was very directive, as JFK was. Okay, the procedures were catch as catch can. There wasn't a systematic approach to the problem. The situation was extremely stressful. Okay, what was going on in Cuba? Okay, and so. Then you have, so those are the antecedents, okay? Then the symptoms that you see in a groupthink situation is that, the group's ability and correctness is overestimated. There's like a closed-mindedness, okay? There's strong pressure toward uniformity, okay? You have people who are mind guards and putting pressure on dissenters, okay? To come around, to agree with it the way the rest of us do. People become nervous about that and they censor themselves. There's this, and that creates that kind of an illusion of unanimity. Okay, and then once you have the illusion of unanimity, everybody's in agreement here. Well, then you get a defective decision making having to do with uh, examining all the facets of the situation, alternatives, objectives, the risks, and things like that. And then we have the high probability of a bad decision. So he wrote about this, and in fact, we learn examining that. And then there was the counter example, which came just a little bit later, which was the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which Kennedy, JFK, and his team seemed to have learned from the mistakes, okay? And Janis goes on to talk about how, they avoided some of these problems, okay? Uh, you know, um, Kennedy absented himself, JFK absented himself. Um, um, his brother, then Attorney General Robert Kennedy, basically was appointed as like the critic, the outside person who would, his job was to basically actually voice objection, okay, and to basically get the mind guarding off, okay, that he was going to look at evidence of these kinds of things going on. Okay, people were told that they should be more freewheeling. They needed to whatever they had in mind they needed to present. Okay, there was not a rush toward a decision. JFK was careful to keep his opinion guarded. Okay, as it evolved. Okay, and that turned out to be a very successful, positive, good decision. Okay, so I got a couple of groupthink videos to show you, and they're worth watching. First, I want to show this one, which was actually a student made one from a few years ago at a different university, but it is profoundly good and it illustrates it. So let's do this one first. All right.
Check out this verbo. Now, look at me. You're right.
Irving Janis was born in Buffalo, New York in 1918. He studied the morale of military personnel while serving in the research branch of the Army in World War II, while later receiving his doctorate from Columbia University in 1948. Janis joined the faculty of Yale University in 1947 and studied in the psychology department for 40 years. He was also an adjunct professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Janis spent much of his career focused on decision-making and group dynamics. Besides his world-famous theory, he also liked to study habitual acts, such as smoking and dieting. Janis could also be considered a very decorated member of the scientific community. The awards he has accumulated include the Socio-Psychological Prize from the American Association for the Advancement of Science in 1967, the Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award for the American Psychological Association in 1981, and even the Society of Experimental Social Psychology's Distinguished Scientist Award in 1991. His accomplishments were fostered from the countless articles and reports Janis has written throughout the years. Janis has also worked with the psychologist Carl Hovland, a co-faculty member of Janis from Yale University, on the theories of attitude and persuasion. The first of the 8 symptoms of groupthink is the illusion of invulnerability, a belief that the group can simply not fail, often while taking huge risks which compromise clear, thoughtful, and analytical thinking.
Sir, North Korea is at it again. They continually taunt our allies in Japan with their missile testing and threats to Guam. We are the greatest country in the world, and our military is the strongest in the world. No one can compare to the superpower of the United States of America.
There's no need to discuss things, because my IQ is so high, I just say we nuke them and get it over with.
Secondly, there is collective rationalization, which is the tendency of a group to disregard warnings and decisions being made in the name of agreement by all people involved.
My people tell me that we've got higher approval ratings than any other president of the United States. These warnings from those Koreans, or is it China? Korea? What? Who cares? Okay? We gotta nuke them. Let's do it in a big, huge way. Can we all agree?
Yes, sir.
There is a belief that whatever the group decides and does, it will be right, as they all know the difference between right and wrong.
Think of all the people that we'd be liberating. We'd be heroes.
That survived the nuking anyway.
We know right from wrong. This is the right thing to do.
Direct pressure on dissenters is an attempt to forcefully persuade any member of the group that has a valid argument against the group's decision. They are told to go with the flow or to be quiet.
Did you watch CNN last night? They keep saying not all North Koreans are bad. They don't want war.
Wrong. Fake news. You see on the Twitter? I gotta tweet this out right now.
North Koreans aren't even very educated. I mean, everyone is starving anyway, so we should just stick with our great leader's plan and put them out of their misery.
This just doesn't feel right. Nuking North Korea could potentially send us into nuclear war. No one wants that. I really feel like we should look at the statistics about this before we rush into anything.
You're being ridiculous.
Let me tell you, I am the smartest person in the world. There is no one smarter than me. I'm the president. I'm smarter than anyone in China, anyone in Japan, and anyone in South Korea. Wait, is it North Korea or is it South Korea? It doesn't matter. We'll nuke them both. But let me tell you.
Well, I just think that we should take a step back.
You're fired.
The group contains self-appointed members who protect the group from conflicting opinions from the outside. These members protect the group and its leader from information that might be problematic to the group's cohesiveness.
Forget that girl was even here, sir. She was a loser. Let's get back to this nuking business.
In some instances, an individual will not express their dissent, even if the rest of the group disagrees with the overall decision. This individual takes on the act of self-censorship. In some cases, self-censorship is enforced by the group, with the group deciding on the punishments.
I feel like I should speak up.
What now?
Nothing, Mr. President.
Illusions of unanimity is when the group assumes a member agrees with the group's decision without hearing them actually say anything.
So that's it then. Do we need to have
No. Let's just nuke them right now, okay? Someone get me on the phone with the nukes, okay?
Groupthink is a silent killer. It invades groups without their knowledge of it happening. Groups are successful when group members bring varied ideas, collective knowledge, and are focused while working together. Groups give advantages to both individuals and businesses as they are valuable because members are able to learn new skills, get feedback from others, and recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, and are able to accomplish tasks that individuals cannot do on their own. Groupthink can twist these advantages of group work to lead to bad decisions being made. Luckily, Janus's prescription for avoiding and preventing groupthink is surprisingly simple, as he outlines 9 key remedies. The leader needs to tell all the group members to critically evaluate all decisions, including decisions made by the leader, who need to accept all criticism of his decisions in order to keep the group members from saying what they think he wants to hear. The leader needs to remain unbiased as much as possible and keep all preferences of how and what they would like the outcome to be to himself. Because of this, the introduction of the topic and task at hand of the group should be limited to a statement about the problem, its parameters, and the available resources. This allows the group to open up all ideas and treat them equally. The group should regularly have separate groups to see if they can come up with similar ideas under different leadership, or if they can break their group up into several subgroups and see if they come up with separate solutions. Every meeting should have an expert on the topic from outside the group giving advice, as well as a member of the group playing devil's advocate. The negative, potentially disastrous effects of groupthink are prevalent in situations with highly cohesive groups, such as politics, the military, and the business world. These effects include blind commitments to practices that have worked in the past, and overconfidence in the group's decisions. By being aware of the dangers of groupthink and following the steps that Irving Janis and other researchers have developed over the years, groups can work effectively and without fearing the effects of groupthink.
Welcome, my trusted advisors. Let us get today's meeting started.
North Korea is continuing their missile testing. How should we proceed?
Let's take our time on this, and let's evaluate our decisions. I like to hear all the decisions. You guys have some great ideas. You need to hear everyone's input. And remember, that we need to be open to criticism.
Well, since I'm your favorite, I think we should.
Not today, my little pet. I'm completely remaining unbiased, unjudgmental, unbiased on this delicate situation.
Let's go ahead and split up to consult with our subcommittees so we can analyze all the data. Mattis, did you call in your specialties?
I sure did.
Fantastic work, team. Let's reconvene in a week at Mar-a-Lago to go over everyone's solutions to find the best, most peaceful way to settle this.
Okay, well, that was entertaining, I think, and I think very instructive. No worries about, you learned a little bit about Irving Janis, but clearly that's not something that you're going to be responsible for. But I think this video very nicely tells us a lot about how groupthink works. Okay, so let's look at one more. Which I think is equally informative in its own way.
At Harvard Business School, we have a unique approach to online learning. Apple products are the best, and they're very user-friendly. When you hear your friends make that statement, do you ever question it? Even though you disagree, you keep your mouth shut because you don't want to be an outcast. That's conformity. When conformity within a group leads to dangerous results, it's called groupthink. There are 8 symptoms of groupthink, which we can see on these 3 budding entrepreneurs. Dave, Frank, and Sylvia are planning to launch a startup which sells used tissues online. You and I, we both know that's the lamest idea ever. But sometimes things play out differently when group dynamics are involved. Here's a sneak peek. Dave says, "We should start selling used tissues. No one has done that yet, and if anyone can do it, it has to be us." That's illusion of invulnerability. Then Frank says, "I know, right? No one is as smart as us to have thought about this killer concept." This is stereotyping others. Silently, Sylvia thinks, yes, because it's a stupid idea, but she doesn't say it, which is self-censorship. Then Dave says, "Sylvia, you agree, right? You seem so excited." That's illusion of unanimity. Sylvia finally says, used tissues, you guys? Seriously? What about the germs? Ew! But Dave counters, "What germs? We are selling sentiments here. Used tissues have a history, and you gotta respect the sentimentality." That's unquestioned belief. Frank reassures, "I'm sure Sylvia agrees that selling used tissues is a brilliant idea. She just doesn't know it yet." This is direct pressure. Sylvia shrugs, saying, "Yeah, I guess. Maybe we can launch Tissues for Issues and make it a noble cause specific project," which is rationalizing. We'll have to test it though. No tests. We are going to launch a Kickstarter campaign. We are going to be huge, says Dave. He's being a mind guard, which is a person who prevents dissent. And thus, the 3 fools launched a used tissue business. Now that you know the symptoms of groupthink, leave us a comment below and tell us if you have ever been a part of groupthink, knowingly or unknowingly.
Cute, right? I think between the two of them, you get the picture of what the symptoms of groupthink are. All right, let's push on. So, so we've already seen in the first video a brief discussion of how to prevent groupthink. Okay, and so these are we can reiterate some of the things that were said: avoid isolation, reduce group pressures to conform. And establish a strong norm of critical review. Well, what we saw our Trump character doing sort of at the end of the first video. Now, basically, again, computerized support systems help with groupthink. Okay, they allow group members to raise their concerns anonymously. Okay. They reduce the directive role of the leader. Okay, they enable group members to provide input simultaneously, so they don't have to wait for a chance to raise their ideas. And basically, if it's kind of an electronic kind of support system, the least assertive group member, the timid one, can state ideas as easily. Okay. Systematic agenda, keep the focus on the group meetings and ideas themselves rather than people in relationships within the group. Okay, this goes back a few years, these ideas when computerized group support systems were just getting started. But again, as we saw with brainstorming, this is the case in which technology basically is one vehicle for avoiding some of the problems that are somewhat inherent in face-to-face kinds of group tasks, if you will. Okay, obviously there are big benefits to face-to-face as well, but this is interesting ideas because the fact that computerized groups, computer-based group discussions and decision making tend to often outperform and avoid groupthink issues more than face-to-face. We learn some things about why that is. What is it about the groups, the face-to-face group interaction for decisions that creates problems, potential problems. All right. And the final thing to mention, okay, about groups, okay, is that sometimes group performance can be diminished by failure to use all of the information and all of the skills that are available to the group. Okay, so there's a phenomenon known as biased sampling. Okay, the tendency for groups to spend more time discussing shared information that everybody already knows. Okay, than unshared information. Okay, so through groupthink, there's sometimes one process in groupthink is like this, where people become reluctant to tell what they know that might be disturbing to the group's momentum. Okay, but basically, you have a tendency in a face-to-face group decision-making situation not to sample information in a biased way. Okay, basically dwelling on what everybody sort of already knows and needs to be discussed, and not fostering information, the bringing out of information that only a few have. So that's the bias sampling problem. Now, this kind of reaches the end of what I want to talk about today. I don't mean to be pessimistic about group decision making, okay? Because if you take further courses, or if you go into like certain kinds of programs that basically talk more and more, there's an increasing understanding for how to avoid these problems and actually use the group to energize and improve various kinds of performance. Okay, so let's leave it on a very on a positive note there. We're it's beyond our scope to get into those things now, but rest assured that groups do some good stuff. Okay, and more we're learning how to bring that out and more we're learning how to avoid some of the pitfalls of group performance that we've seen in today's narration. Okay, so that's it for now, and I think that's it. That's it. We will see you next time. Hey, goodbye.